let's say welcome to everybody who's arriving. We probably ought to get started because we have a lot on today. As you know, if you presumably you're here because you've read the abstract and the introduction, and you'll know that we have a lot of panelists who all have a lot to say. So we've got some voices of experience of career breaks, and originally when Warren and the early career researchers were talking about this, we wanted to have a wide variety of career breaks. But fortunately or unfortunately, almost all of the career breaks where we've found speakers are for people who've broken their career in order to do something that involves future childcare. And once you have future childcare that goes with coming back from the career break, that is a different sort of experience, perhaps, from coming back from a career break with no childcare attached. We've asked the speakers to stick to the break as far as they can, but they will wander off from time to time to mention the coming back experience, which is different if you have childcare that goes with it. So I'm going to move on and just say what the program is. I'm Ruth Kaufman. I'm the chair of the event subcommittee of Women in OR and Analytics Network, and I'm joined by Laura Boyle, who is chair of the Early Career Researchers Network, to ask the panelists to talk about their experience. The panelists will introduce themselves when we get to that stage, but you can see there who they are and see them on screen, I hope. And then after, it'll be a little bit more than half an hour, we'll hand over to the audience for Q&A. And we'll have we hope, if all goes to plan, about 20 minutes for Q&A. Final top tip from each panelist: we are hoping to close at 2:30. If there are still questions that you'd like to put to any of the panelists, they've all said very kindly they will be happy to take questions outside this meeting if you want to contact them by email via the OR Society. I'm just going to say a few words about the Women in OR and Analytics Network, which has been going for a few years now. And mainly what it's been doing is running meetings, most of them online, which give us a chance to network, to exchange ideas, to share experiences, to add people to the list of people who we know, who we can turn to for help, or who we can support if we need to, and to enjoy ourselves doing it. And we have been establishing mentoring activities as well. So that's a brief introduction to Women in OR and Analytics. We have 3 things in the diary already for the next few months. We have a Christmas social on the 15th of December. Star 3, it's with Wisdom, the Euro Women's Network, Worms, which is the Informs or US Women's Network, and us on a 1-hour event coming up to Christmas. Then we have, in January, we have Ana Sofia Pereira, who has, from MSc in OR, gone to leading one of the top logistics software companies in Portugal. And then there will be a follow-up in February. We've got a follow-up to today with Kathy Kodiadis and Katie Perry, talking about Kathy's experience of a break, which turned from the planned few months into more than 5 years, and which should make a very good counterpoint to today's experience. Can I hand over to Laura to talk a little bit about the Early Career Researchers Network and to kick off the introductions to the panelists?
Thanks, Ruth. So just very quickly, the ECR network, we aim to support early career researchers, and the aims include peer support, a place to get your questions answered as an early career researcher, and it's also a place to feature early career work and celebrate early career accomplishments. And we're also trying to provide information for early career researchers on appropriate workshops and training events and other relevant things. So we have previously done this via a LinkedIn group. So you can find us in a LinkedIn group. And if anyone's interested in the link, I can share it. And we have recently, just this year, become a special interest group. So you can actually join our special interest group to receive emails and hear about events via that special interest group. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So we've had a busy year this year. We had a 2-day long workshop at OR 65, and that was really, really good. We also had an event on making an impact with your research, what to know before starting an impact case study. That was actually the previous year. And also this year we've had an online event, which was how to grow into an effective and fun lecturer. And we actually have a recording of that. That was great as well. So you'll hear more about our upcoming events as we plan them for 2024. We're planning to have an event on communication, how to communicate your research and present your work. That's one of our events that's planned, and we're having a meeting soon to finalise the rest of them. If you can think of anything that would be particularly useful for you, please also let us know. And this is just photos of everyone who's on the early career committee, and some of them are here today, which is great. So Luke, Amelia, Siamak and Zara. I'm currently the chair this year and Luke's the secretary, and we'll be cycling our positions for next year. So there'll be a new chair, a new secretary next year. Okay, without anything further, I'm just going to get straight into asking the first question of the panelists. So the first question that we're asking is that we'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So you'll notice we haven't actually introduced the panelists. They're going to introduce themselves and say what they do when their career breaks occurred, and how they decided to take their career breaks when they did, sort of including whether it was planned or not. So the first speaker is Antuela.
Hi, thank you very much, Laura and Ruth, for inviting me to this panel. My name is Antuela Taco. I'm a professor in operational research at Loughborough University. In my research, I use systems modeling tools to improve processes and the decision making. I use primarily simulation, but also problem structuring and software tools. And I work in healthcare, supply chain, and more recently in circular economy. In answer to the question on career breaks, I have taken 2 career breaks due to maternity. My first maternity leave was when I was a lecturer in my early 30s, and the second one, which was in close succession to that one, and they both lasted around 11 to 12 months. Now, in terms of how I decided to take it, for me, it was reframing the priorities in my mind and thinking about what's important at that stage. And as a woman, having a family and having kids is one of those priorities for me. And I wanted to make sure that I had as much time as possible with my kids and bond with them in a very important stage of their lives. It brings, of course, a new dimension to you as a parent, and coming back to work, you are back again, but you are now a parent with another identity as well as a professional. I have to say there was an element of guilt going back or going out of work, because I'm quite passionate about my job, and I feel also that I don't want to let my colleagues down. However, it had to be the right priorities for my family first. Thank you.
I think I'm the next. So I'm Belén Martín Barragán. Sorry about my voice today. I'm a reader management science. My research is about, well, I always liked, since I started my PhD like 20 years ago, this mix between machine learning or data science and OR, always looking at it from the OR perspective. What can OR do here? And in that sense, I've worked a lot in interpretability for machine learning, always using OR, either from, kind of from the point of view of optimizing, but also from the point of view of modeling. So that's what I do in my research. And my career breaks, they were both of them because of the maternity leaves that I needed to take care of my children when they were very, very young. And the reason was like, basically age. I didn't have much time for kind of like, I didn't want to leave it too further because it can be dangerous when you are over 40. So I have them on my 37 or so, and the second one when I was 40. So that was the reason. Also was planned, but at the same time it was like there was no other option.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Michael Mortensen. So I work at WBS. If the big logo didn't give it away. I'm a reader in analytics and data science. Primarily, my work is on the teaching track, and my focus is mostly on elements such as curricular design. I, in fact, a long time ago, did a PhD in cohort with the OR Society, looking at the curricula of business analytics master's degrees. An area I've gone to work on with as well. So I think the dry throat is infectious. Apologies. My technique-wise, I'm mostly interested. As my career's gone on, I've got more into the data side of things, really. But I do a lot of machine learning, some LLM systems, and that kind of thing. In terms of my career break, so it was summer 2019. It was less a formal career break than most of my colleagues on this call. I kind of got there by cobbling together paid and unpaid leave and adoption leave. So we adopted 2 little girls in the summer of 2019, one at the age of 3, the other at the age of 7 months. And the eldest has just turned 8 and the youngest is turning 5 next month. So it is a slightly different process for various reasons to traditional parenting. So it was less clear when the time would be. You kind of have to sit ready to go at various different times. There's quite a lot of work that goes up into the build up of it. So it wasn't a case of you wait until the adoption, then you go on to leave. So there were several trips to London and various other activities we were involved in the build up to it. And then the kids came here and a tornado came and completely changed my life entirely. And yeah, came back to work around about the term of 2019-20 and quickly walked into a pandemic lockdown. So it was a strange time. Certainly.
Thank you. Mitu.
Hello, I'm Mitu Norris. I work, like my colleagues, I work in central government, so I'm a practitioner. I work for the Government Operational Research Service. I took 3 career breaks. The first one was in 2001, and that was purely for me. So it's to go travelling. I could have taken up to 6 months, but only used 3 actually. And my job was kept open. You have to, at that time, you could apply for career breaks that were outside of, maternity, paternity leave, particular items. You're not guaranteed your same role back, but because mine was for such a short time, actually, they managed to keep my current post open. The other 2 breaks that I took were in 2003 and 2007 for my 2 children. They're both around a year. The second one was slightly longer because I have a 4-year gap between my 2 kids. So there was no point coming back exactly a year after having my second, because then my son was starting in reception and you have all those sort of part days and half days and all the faffing about throughout September. So I just extended it for a bit longer. Yeah, but I think both of them worked well, particularly the first career leave. I mean, if you can do it, and if you the security of having a job to come back to once you have actually taken some time out to do, I suppose something for leisure is an added advantage.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all. For those who've joined us a little bit late, we're posing some questions to the whole set of panelists, except Eleanor Reynolds, who can't join us till after 2 o'clock, and she'll introduce herself then. And Mitu, I'm afraid, will have to leave us at 2. So we're posing some questions, Laura and I, to the panelists, and then it'll be time for audience Q&A sometime shortly after 2. So thank you very much for the introductions. Our next question to you and these are all long compound questions, is what do you think was the impact of the break itself on your career? So not sort of going back and having the children or whatever was the aftermath, but the impact of the break itself on your career, and how did you manage that? And could more have been done to help you manage that? And we're going in the same order. So Antuela, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. So in answer to your question, Ruth, I really think that when we have taken a short break with the uniqueness that I took 2 short breaks in very close succession together. So that's really what made it a little bit more impactful for me. So, however, I need to say that it actually, it depends where you see, how you see this from. If you see this on a longer period of time, so my breaks have been a little bit further away than perhaps some of my colleagues' timings. If you look at it from the more longer term perspective, you think 1 or 2 years here or there is not going to really affect your career. And if I was to take that wider perspective, I would say it hasn't really made such a big difference. However, because this breaks, you tend to take them when you are an early career researcher at that point in time. And I've been trying to think really hard about the kind of things that I missed out on. There are things that you miss out, and especially due to the fact that our job as academics is quite research oriented. I found that with that, the fact that I was away from people's minds. I wouldn't get invitations to participate in collaborations, for example. I wouldn't be attending conferences. So there was things I missed out. I remember also, for example, we had started with a colleague of mine, some really good collaboration. We were writing grants together, but then on the recycling of that grant, we missed, while I was away, we missed out on the contact, so we never continued that. So there are things that you miss out, especially with research. Ideas move on, things move on, and you miss out. But there's ways to kind of mitigate that. And in my view, mitigation is really about building up the research beforehand and then continuing when you come back. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. There might be some more questions from the audience later on that. Thanks a lot, Antuela. Belen.
Thank you. I think my thinking is very much in line with Antuela. Basically, what I think it was more impactful for me was kind of like, or what I feel is very important, is connecting and networking and kind of like being in people's mind and people like really thinking about you, about someone that is research active. There is a tendency that you are on a break, you don't go for a year in conferences, then there is also the impact later on because you also don't do conferences during a few years, and that has a huge impact in kind of like how people see you as research active, even when you are research active, because you've been there like only 2 years, 1 year, then you are back on work, and then another year maternity leave. Still, all those years, even the ones in between, you are missing that part. So networking is very important during that period of break. So if you are break from research, but you're not a break from people's mind. Another thing is like also depends a lot on your career stage. For example, for me, I was lucky that I took it when I was very advanced in research, and I was doing things mainly by collaborating with others, by supervising others, which is also challenging because you want to keep a bit of an eye on the supervision when you are on leave or when you are in the career break. So it's not a complete career break, but this allows things to kind of like continue. If I had done it like a few years before, when it was kind of like, it was also collaboration, but it's like if I stop things are stopped, because the kind of collaboration is with people that are basically your former supervisors or the people that are mentoring you, or they feel they are above you, then you stop and things, they don't advance. So it's completely different. It's very nice when you are in a collaboration where either you are the one on top or you are on the same, page than everyone else. So, that things are going to keep on advancing. That's another big difference, I think.
Thanks very much.
There was a coding thing.
Sorry, I missed that last bit. Just
last thing is like the coding. For me, it was very hard to get back and return to programming, because that comes back, but it's still like something that when you come back, there is an impact. But just like you forgot almost everything. So it's just relearning.
Thanks, Belen. Michael.
Yeah, some great points from Antuela and Belen, and but it did make me think to some degree. I think this question will vary in greatly by the job role that you have and your responsibilities in that role. And I suspect Mitu might have some different comments as well coming from the practice side. So I've been less involved in research in my career and more on the teaching administration side. And at the point of taking the break, I was both a course leader and a group leader, so sort of line manager of a small team. And I found that break had a significant impacts essentially in that capacity, and it took quite a bit of time, I think, to kind of, I say retain control, but get everything back to the sort of stability that we had before in terms of that. There's probably a degree to which there is a university thing where people tend to go more in their own directions than in other industries. But I found that it was actually very disruptive, that period. As Belen says as well, it was difficult managing the actually being on a break and not contactable, but also obviously feeding in when things are important. So and that kind of also puts you in a difficult position in terms of your mentality to the break and your mentality to going back in to working with the group again, I think. And the only other last thing I'd add, I know we're not meant to talk too much about parenting, but I think for whatever reason you have your career break, it's almost certainly for something fairly fundamental in your life, even if it's traveling for 6 months or whatever that would be, you are having fundamentally changing experiences. And I think you can't underestimate the extent to which you change in that period and coming back into it.
Very good points. Thank you. Me too. You're left with the sweeper role. Give us your own answers.
Well, I don't think that it's that different, to be honest, even though, as a practitioner. But when I left, so the travelling bit didn't affect my career at all, I don't think. It was just a nice jolly, really. It was lovely. And I came back and I feel that my career hadn't stilted at all. But when I went for my maternity leave, I was a senior analyst, not a team leader. And I think I would subsequently, colleagues of mine and friends of mine who have asked for advice after I came back, I sort of said, well, if you can, try and get to team leader first, and then go on your maternity leave. Not that you can plan that far, that meticulously. It's not a project, but when I came back as part-time, and I think that did affect how quickly then I got to a team leader post, because I'm not, you're not around as much, but I knew that it would mean that my career would be stilted for a while. So I took that decision at that time, knowing that actually it's quite hard. It is hard juggling both anyway, but I think you have to take a step back at one. You can't. I know in the ideal world you should be able to have both, but it's physically really demanding having a kid anyway. You're knackered most of the time, and it's just hard trying to juggle that and your work. So if you want to be overly committed to both, you will never get any sanity, I don't think. So I think that's the thing. It's a tough decision, but hopefully, weigh the things up, see when it is, that you are, because you will have to take your foot off the pedal at some, in some case, in some ways. And obviously the baby can't, is dependent on you, so you can't do that. So it will inevitably be your career. So be prepared for that, I would say. However, I have got to that, and I am back on track again. Both of mine are, well, one's 20 and one's 17 now. So it just takes a bit longer, because I think becoming part-time does really affect how quickly you progress, in the practitioner world, really.
We're hoping to have an event on part-time. Laura, I'm going to just, I know we agreed a process, but because I see Mitu has to leave any minute.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you can, the next question can go straight to Mitu and then the others.
Oh, thank you.
I'll ask it quickly. So the third question we're going to ask you is, what sort of mechanisms were available to support you before, during, and immediately after your break, and how useful were they?
So I would say for both my paternity leaves, you know, my line manager was great in both of them. The first time I went, my department was, yeah, I will say nigh on useless, because they forgot I was coming. I ended up ringing them going, oh, by the way, I'm coming back in 2 months. You know, who shall I apply to? Oh, and they didn't know I was on maternity leave. So that wasn't very helpful and not very encouraging. But for the second one, I think there were, by that time, it was more of a, I don't know why HR just seemed to be more on the ball. But yeah, they did know. They kept in touch with me, probably quarterly. And then, so it was a much easier transition. You know, it's much easier for you if your own HR gets in touch with you and sort of starts the ball rolling in terms of, you know, are you still thinking of coming back then? If so, these are the posts that are available. And, you know, they put some work in from their end. As I say, on the first one, it was actually, I went on maternity leave. I was sort of forgotten about it quite a lot. And then I had to try and find somewhere, you know, luckily my line managers and my old division were really good. And they said, oh, don't worry, we haven't lost you. So it's big enough for us to find you a job here, and we'll let HR know what we're doing. But yeah, there are better processes in place. I'm glad to hear. So yeah. So I'm really sorry I can't stay till the very end. It's because we have a board meeting. That's why.
And you did well to squeeze in all 3 questions as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much. And yeah,
thanks for joining us, Mitu.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we'll continue with Antuela for that question.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have to say that Mitu brought in some really good points through her introduction, really saying about the fact that there are some decisions that you make at that point in your career that whether you want to go part-time or not. And that was one of the decisions that I toyed around quite a lot, especially when I first came back from maternity. And I would say that I have regretted, but I didn't take one. And the main reason was exactly the points that Mitu said, that it delays you. However, I should say I have regretted that. So I wanted to make that point. Now, in terms of mitigation strategies, what I would really say, and I kind of made that point even in the ECR workshop in September, for me, the point is, especially for women or people who might be wanting to take career breaks, considering career breaks more widely, is that planning in advance from the point of view that what I'd say is I really worked hard before going on that break. I knew I wanted to have children, so I made sure I worked really hard beforehand in developing research. I traveled a lot before, especially for conferences. And it is really, really funny, really. One of the situations I was in where I wanted to go to a conference, I was invited to present a paper, and one of my late colleagues in the school was wondering, why does she want to go to so many conferences? And they were questioning whether to allow me to go. And in all fairness, and I'm really thankful to him, he allowed me at the end, and that was the best time. I even got a marriage proposal in that event. However, what I wanted to say is that it's all about planning and doing some more preparation for it beforehand, and being prepared that after that there will be some difficulties and going for it. But the point that I'd like to make is hang on there and be resilient. Thank you.
Thanks, Antuela. The next we'll have Bella.
Hi, I kind of like agree a lot with Antuela, and with respect to the situation in the practitioners, I was thinking like how parallel it is with research. On one hand, it's completely different in the sense that we don't have to kind of like search for another post, or kind of like this formal thing about, HR calling you and then kind of like seeing where you are and the possibilities. But it's like the same, but informal, because in research, at the end, you have your collaborations. And you need kind of like your collaboration to still think that you're going to be very, able to join to a project. So if they are applying for a project, in the process of the application, you're in maternity leave, it's good that you kind of like have these contacts, but also like colleagues that you can trust, that they are going to think on you, and they are also trusting you to come back and join the project later on, because the project will be accepted when you are back in, and then you will not be part of the project. And that's kind of like really a miss. Maybe something like is something that also formally UKRI, EPSRC, they can think about how to create mechanisms that, avoid that. Like, for example, someone that just came from maternity leave, if it was not in the proposal, how you can, let this person in. They have mechanisms for the opposite, like once a project can be delayed, or you can change one person for another person's maternity leave and cannot, of course, contribute to the project. But what about the opposite, which is also very interesting and very, very important?
Thank you, Villain. And next you have Michael.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I have a bit less to say on this anyway, I think, but my general feeling was there wasn't, or at least I didn't perhaps proactively enough seek out any of the mechanisms that perhaps could have been used in there. I think partly that was because of the way I somewhat cobbled together my leave rather than doing it in a more official format. But I would just make a general plea to anyone whose colleagues go off on adoption leave, or anyone who's involved in planning of these things. It is a huge amount, particularly at the start. It was very challenging returning back in that fashion. And it generally seems to me that most places I've seen policy on this is actually just a watered down version of typical maternity paternity policies. And in fact, probably a bit more allowances do need to be made. But I think I bought just enough time for Eleanor to arrive. So hi, Eleanor.
Thanks. Welcome, Eleanor. Thanks very much, Michael. Eleanor, you've timed your entry perfectly. Eleanor's just rushed here to the rest of the audience. Eleanor's just rushed here from giving a lecture.
Thank you.
And Eleanor, we've been hearing from the others. If you want to just give us a bit of an introduction to what you do when your breaks occurred and how they were planned, how they came about, what was the impact on your career, and the mechanisms available to support you. I think you've got a very different story from some of the other people we've heard. So over to you.
Yes, I believe I'm a bit of a contrast, and I've prepared some notes for myself. So I'm Eleanor Reynolds. I'm a teaching fellow at Warwick Business School, and I've taken 2 maternity breaks. But to an extent, I could also view my entire PhD as a bit of a career break, or perhaps a career transition, because I've previously worked for 12 years in industry. And I've now, coming to the end of the PhD, chosen to remain in academia. I met my partner just a few weeks before applying for my PhD, and we didn't want to wait until after my PhD to start a family. So my first child was born a few weeks after I finished my data gathering, and my second a few weeks after I submitted my thesis. We were very fortunate that this was what we wanted and happened just when we hoped it would. So these were both planned breaks. So the end of the data gathering, the few weeks after I submitted the thesis, fortunately it all worked out to plan. In terms of impacts, I don't think that taking a maternity break during a PhD is optional, but I do feel very strongly that life events don't always fit your expectations or your preferences. You just have to get on with life. So financially, I was not a salaried employee. I was on an industry-funded scholarship, and my sponsors could have said that they weren't paying for maternity leave. In fact, at that time, that is what the university would have said had I been a university-funded scholarship. So I was fortunate that although the scholarship was much less than my previous salary had been, my sponsors amended my contract to add bridge funding so that I could receive maternity payments that were proportional to the scholarship that they were giving me. Then by the time I had my second child, I'd come to the end of my research contract and funding, so I had no maternity pay whatsoever. I did look into statutory government payments, but I wasn't eligible for those. And unfortunately for this particular meeting, I can't remember why I wasn't eligible, but I wasn't. The 2 breaks then really elongated the time that I spent as a student. And on my return, they restricted the extent to which I could attend conferences. So the increase in online meetings and events that's happened over the past few years has been really helpful for me. Trying to analyse data during lockdown with an 18-month-old was a total disaster. But the following year, I had my Viva online and my eight-week-old baby was with me. So that worked out quite well, really. Support mechanisms were, as you might expect, not very substantial, shall I say. I'd say there was mixed support before I took my breaks. And for my first pregnancy, I was really very nervous about telling my supervisors and telling the doctoral programme. Key people responded quite reasonably and they knew approximately what to do. But there was also this feeling that in a sense it was inconvenient. It created a need to justify why I wouldn't finish my PhD on time. And that was important for me, but it was also a big concern for the university. They also weren't keen to support my request for maternity leave, for maternity pay, sorry. That was okay because I was far more confident and comfortable speaking to my industry sponsors about this. They'd previously been my employers. They were very supportive and they treated me just as though I was a regular full-time permanent employee. During my leave then, I was pretty much on my own. My formal status was that I was withdrawn from my studies with a medical certificate provided. I got 12 months, that was the maximum that was allowed. One of my supervisors kept in contact and I maintained what you might call personal contacts, but formally there was absolutely nothing in terms of contact from the university. Afterwards, the re-enrollment process was very clunky. I remember thinking that if my medical reason for leave had been in any way related to mental health issues, the re-enrollment process would have been an absolutely terrible experience. I also found that because I returned part-time, I wasn't entitled to a desk. And in the end, the term the office used was that they would turn a blind eye if I made an informal private arrangement with a fellow student, which is what I did. I desk shared with somebody who wasn't in very often. In many ways, my second maternity leave was much simpler. I already had no contract, no pay, and no office facilities. But I did have thesis amendments to complete. My departmental office said that because I was post-Viva, I couldn't withdraw from the programme and they weren't confident that I'd be given an extension. But actually, when I emailed the central university team, 20 minutes later, they emailed back saying, congratulations, we've applied a 12-month extension. So that was pretty good.
We're going to have to move on here, Eleanor, quickly. So
okay.
I think
one sentence, is that okay?
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah.
So at that stage, I was working with just one supervisor and my intern examiner, and they were very supportive. They wanted me on the team, in fact. So I finished my PhD in parallel with a short-term teaching contract, which then ran straight into my current role as a teaching fellow. That's me done. Sorry, Ruth.
Thank you very much. No. If we had lots of hands in the audience, I would like to invite the audience now to ask questions, because that's why we've cut all of our panelists off so short, is to leave space for questions. So do please stick your hand. You could put a question in the chat if you like, but we'd be delighted if you would stick your hand up. And I think we can all agree that those were 5 now very interesting and different experiences, overlapping in showing just how determined you have to be sometimes, even in the nicest and most supportive of work, or feel nice and supportive, but to actually get the changes that you need. I can't see any hands up for questions. Can you see any, Laura? In the absence of any from the audience, do you want to go first, Laura, or shall I go first?
You go first.
Okay. Well, if I can ask you, sort of looking back, if there is one thing you think your employer should have done or could have done, if anybody would like to take that, and we don't have to go in any particular order. So if you would just leap in as panelists. Oh, Belen.
Maybe I can start. So basically what I felt when that was one thing, like I went in maternity. My salary, the university stopped paying that. But in my department, my colleagues were picking up my teaching. And that was kind of like, I got very kind of like upset about that, because it's like, like it's like the university is saving money with my salary and me being in maternity leave. And I think the most fair thing to do, the minimum that the university can do, is to kind of like provide a short-term contract to the person to kind of cover my teaching, or make use for the colleagues. Sometimes it's difficult to find, because we do research and we do very specialized teaching, but at least get someone to the department, not to the whole university, so they can do with that money whatever they want. But the people that work closer to you, so they can use that money to kind of hire people to help, and to kind of like, not just kind of like they were doing more teaching. And once the second time, indeed, it was a period where some people they left because they left the jobs to to go to another university. So basically, in the process of finding new people to replace them, there were two of us in maternity leave, plus several of them. The huge amount of teaching that my colleagues got was really unfair. And I was saying, but the university is getting my salary, and it's like my colleagues are doing me a favor, which is not a favor because I'm also entitled to that, but they are kind of like covering that. It was so unfair.
Thank you. Let's hope somebody from Edinburgh is listening. Would anybody else like to take that? We do have another question from the
I
audience
just
now.
wanted to touch upon what Belen said, because I did mention the element of guilt earlier in my introduction. And in fact, that was one of the elements of guilt that I knew when I was away. I wasn't away to have fun, which is one of the key messages I want to send to everybody as well. When somebody goes on maternity leave, they are not having a break and having fun. It is actually quite a tough job to do. But also, I did feel that guilt because I knew people within the group would be taking on the extra work, which made me uncomfortable. In terms of some of the things that came up earlier, I wanted to also comment on the fact that, yes, we did rely a lot on our personal contacts, and I do have a few very close collaborators to thank for the fact that they kept me going with my research papers, or kind of nudged me along saying, why are you not working on our paper, even when I came back. But there is another element that needs to be recognized here about what the fact when you're coming back, yes, you are not the same person, but we need to also realize that you lose confidence. You don't know what's been going on. There is the personal element, and it's really a call out there for those good managers that will welcome you back and make you part of the team, because it's hit and miss. That's it from me.
Thank you. Would either of the others like to comment, or should we move on?
I just very briefly echo, particularly Belen's comments about putting upon colleagues, and in fact it can be even worse, because I would say largely a lot of the work I did wasn't covered at all while I was away, so I came back in with guilt, but also a massive in tray of things. And the only other point, and maybe Eleanor will pick up on it, is that I feel probably the system is not as good at dealing with the slightly more niche cases. I think most organizations have good points for the main reasons for career breaks, but I think I'd echo some of Eleanor's feelings. I think in terms of if you are steering a bit from the beaten track, it suddenly becomes a lot more difficult.
Thank you. Belen, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, actually, well, I want to point out not to my personal experience, but the experience I've seen in many PhD students, and the one I listened to Eleanor. I think, even with my complaint about the university, lack of support to the department when I went in maternity leave, I think it's even worse, the lack of support to PhD students. I think we need to do much better in the system to support them with proper salaries, so they can really have that time, and proper also not just salaries, but kind of like the fact that they have studentships instead of contract. It has a major impact on the statutory leave that was also pointed out by Eleanor. I think it's very unfair also, and we need to do better on that.
Go on, Eleanor.
Can I get going on the questions that have come up in the chat? Matthew's saying,
Okay. Would
you consider another career break in the future? And then Krista, did your career break inspire any changes in your research or career in general? I've got an answer that kind of covers both of those. I think one of the longer term impacts for me in my break was that I had time to realise what I missed. And so I particularly missed my students and my teaching, and I'm by no means sure that I would be in the role that I am in now if I hadn't had that experience of having those 2 years out and missing what I had been doing. So I don't think that having had the 2 career breaks would put me off considering another in the future, in answer to Matthew's question.
Thanks. And as you've moved us nicely onto those questions in the chat, would Antuela, Belen, or Michael like to comment on those? Who wants to go first?
Yeah,
Antuela.
I can comment. Yes, I would definitely consider another career break, not for children, but I would be open to thinking about the idea of going, finding something else, for example, or finding out about another industry. I think it's always good to kind of have inputs or to understand other areas. So I would really encourage those, because it enriches our own experiences and perhaps makes us realize our value much better. Did my career break inspire any changes in my area of interest? Not personally. I don't think I have a real answer to that, so I'll let my colleagues to comment on the next.
Yeah, for me, it made a big change. The fact that when I came back to work, and I started to think why. For me, it's like more the question about why am I here and leaving my kids at home, which I loved staying with them and taking care of them. There are the challenges and tough work, but this a challenge and the tough work that I discovered that I really like. And then it's kind of like why I'm doing that. So it changed my view of what to do with my time in work. And indeed, before I was not very ambitious. I was ambitious with my research because I like doing research, but not about career progression, and not at all about, for example, development and leadership and all of that. But then I thought I became a more confident person after having my kids, much more confident, self-confident. It's something that I was lacking of before having my kids, and then I had it much better. And then I started to think I have things to contribute to, and then I need leadership skills, and I need to, get on, other roles that are beyond research, but they can be good for research because they can be, for example, like sitting in committees or, so contributing to the university or to the research through OR society. I'm not doing because now I'm too busy. But it's something that I also consider now at some point. If I see how I can contribute, I'm very keen on doing that. And that's because of the career break. And then, coming back and saying, why am I coming back? It's just to write papers? Not really. It needs to be something more broad.
Thank you very much. We've probably only got time for one more full question in the chat, and there are two very good questions in the chat. So the first is, what can colleagues and peers do to support people going on or returning from career breaks, apart from not making you feel guilty? And I'd like to open that to you. And then the last question is suggestions regarding planning for maternity leave, and perhaps we can pick that up in the top tips, which we go into after this last question. So first of all, who would like to pick up on what you would like as colleagues and peers, what we can do to help others who are going on or coming back from break?
I have a quick one on that. That I think the challenge is really not making it a zero-sum game where, as Belen says, colleagues lose out because they're taking on extra work, or you feel guilty, or you end up with that backlog afterwards. I think, as has been said, typically we're always taking these career breaks for good reasons. We're entitled to them, essentially, right? So there should be, we need to work together to try and make sure that no one is losing out from that. That should be part of our normal business. And just to say, I would also consider another career break.
Thank you.
Anytime soon.
Does anybody else want to respond on that before we add anything to that before we move on to your top tips?
I think for colleagues, it's like taking into account respecting their time, because every child is different. So some people would have more time for something, maybe doing some reading or but most of them, they're not going to have time for kind of like working on things. But also count on them, especially when you are thinking about the future projects. Count on the people that are currently in maternity leave. Future ideas for future papers. Think about, I could collaborate with them if I wait 2 months, just about to come. Think about that. And also think about the way, and think about what they can do. So they're not going to think about, valuing their ideas and their experience more than the time they can put on things.
Thank you. And some employers have keeping in touch days. And I think it's a really good principle, which they would pay for, is a keeping in touch day 2 or 3 times during a break, and makes a lot of difference. But finally, thank you all very much for all of that. Thanks, audience, for questions. 1 minute each only for our speakers on your top tip, and remembering Xiaochen's interest in planning, but your top tip to anybody considering this. Do you want to go first, Antuela?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you. So really, my top tip is, if you really need to take that career break, don't think about what's that going to do in your career, because we work in long years anyway. I think it's more about what are your priorities, what is that career break going to bring to you. And perhaps one thing, because Xiaochen has put that question there, one comment I'd probably say is think about having some financial security if you can. But life is too short. There are always opportunities out there. One door closes, another opens. That's from me.
Thank you, Antuela. That's lovely. Belen?
For me, it would be make use of social media and online digital tools to keep yourself in people's mind. And also, if you can, also in person, if you can attempt something in person with the baby, not work events, but if there are like social events with colleagues, or kind of like invite them for a coffee, or just kind of like whatever you can do while at the same time that kind of like taking care of your children, or whatever you are doing. If you can kind of like blend the two things, I think that's a very nice thing to do, and it will create very good memories, because we love our work. So kind of like doing that something with your dear ones, I would say blend the two things in a nice way, always in a way that you enjoy it, not like real work. I'm talking about these ways of being in, you know, others' mind, reminding them that you are there and you like your work and you want to collaborate with them.
Thank you, Belen. Michael?
Oh, wasn't sure if we were going to do new alphabetical order.
Yeah, I couldn't bear to give the last word to a bloke, I'm afraid. As our token male,
Yes, indeed.
you get...
I'll try and give a slightly pithy one then. I think a lot of the time while you're planning and on a career break, your focus is on how we could make sure things will stay the same afterwards. But in fact, I think, going to Krista's question earlier, we tend to be in these fields very tunnel visioned and very, an analytical mindset tends to take us that way. Having a chance to step back, it does give you the opportunity to think how things could be different when you come back, and I think that's a worthwhile exercise as well.
Thank you very much. And Eleanor?
Yes, okay, so I'm going to say step into your personal time machine so that you can think through the possible consequences of taking, deferring or rejecting the potential opportunity for a career break, and consider how these might make you feel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And actually, I didn't need to worry about who's going to get the last word, because the last word's going to come from me and Laura. But I would like to say, firstly, thank you very much to our panelists. It's been really tough to squeeze everything you wanted to say into not very much time at all. And I know you've all got lots more to say. So as I said, if anybody does have continuing questions, do follow up. The second thing is to say this was the first time that the WARAN and the Early Career Researchers Network have had a joint event, and we would really like to know what you thought about it. So I've just put links to a feedback form in the chat, so do please fill in the feedback form. Thank you enormously to Laura as well for working together to make this happen. And I would also like to say that everything that we've heard from the speakers is about the importance of networking. Well, not everything, but a huge amount carries over this importance of networking. And these networks are here for you, whether you are actually in the office at the moment, or whether you are on break, or whether you are thinking about going on break. Please use them. Please use them to just find people, turn up to things and ask, or have side conversations in the chat, or contact any of us to get in touch. But the networking is great when things are going well, but it's hugely important when things are difficult, especially if you're feeling isolated. Laura, would you like to? We didn't disagree this bit. You have the last word.
That's a really nice last word, actually, Ruth, is about using the network and reaching out. And yeah, just like to reiterate thanks to all of the speakers and panelists for sharing your experiences with us. I really appreciate it. And I think it would be really helpful for a lot of ECRs who are here or watch the recording. Thanks to everyone who came in the audience as well and asked questions. Thanks to Ruth and the WARAN committee for so much hard work. And yeah, please do fill out the feedback form, because we're hoping that we could have more joint events between the ECR network and WARAN, and we really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And I should also perhaps say, WARAN is delighted to have a lot of men in the audience as well. We think these are joint issues. So whatever my snide little comment to Michael was, it's great to have a proper a mixed audience like this. So thank you, and thanks to Karen as well for doing all the supporting. Michael's put his link in the chat, and I see people are going to leave. Everybody else wants to put their link in the chat. That would be nice, and we can keep it open for a moment, because I see you're all still quite a few people here. If anybody wants to unmute to say anything, fine.
Just to say, meticulously run by Laura and Ruth, keeping us on track to almost exactly past is no small feat. So,
well, thanks to you all. And
I
have a safe journey home. Sorry, go on,
I just want to say great questions as well. It was very interesting. And I also wanted to say that all our experiences that we've had have made us realize better how to tackle issues that come up. And it's really useful then when we speak to colleagues who are going through these situations, we have always some strategies to how to work them out. So it's been really great to be in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. And I said to anybody else who's still there, never suffer in silence. You're never completely on your own if you've got anybody's email address. Just
Absolutely, yeah.
great.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the event. Thank you for all the organizers. It's really important issues to discuss.